Welcome, modern day mystics, fellow truth seekers, James and Justin back again. And today we have a special interview for you with TikTok sensation Yam Socks. He is a very popular TikToker who's got a massive following, I think, who connects with like-minded spiritual thinkers out there. He shares some of his insights, and I think he really helps his audience. So I'm looking forward to this one.
Yeah, I've been tuning into his lives, and they're quite the thing to behold. They're pretty epic. I'm excited for this one.
So without further ado, let's begin. So Yam, welcome to the show. It is great to have you. Thanks so much for being with us today. I guess we got to send a shout out to Sky Guardian, who kind of got us connected. So thanks, Sky Guardian, for that. But I've been watching your show. I see that you help a lot of people online with their spiritual journeys. You create a community of like-minded thinkers and bring people together. And I thought maybe for our audience who might be new to you and your content, maybe a good place to begin would be with your journey, how this kind of all began for you and how you became this popular influencer now on TikTok and YouTube. So I'll give you the floor, and you can tell our audience about yourself.
Sure. Well, I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me on. How can one put a specific moment on this journey? I always say that just being born into this universe, naturally you have to wonder why. What's going on? Black holes, supernova, Big Bang, life, evolution, all of it. It's just so amazing. I have to start to wonder what it all means. I was very naturally drawn towards it. When I was younger, my parents didn't really give me a religion or my own little path. They said, find it for yourself, whatever makes you happy. And for me at the time, I found that science was a beautiful path to discover the nature of reality. So I went to university studying theoretical physics. And whilst in my dormitory, pondering about, what this universe really means, I started to realize that, physics is great, don't get me wrong, but the answers I'm looking for aren't there. So I started to withdraw my search more inward to what I could know for certain, beyond evidence, beyond experiment, to experience itself. And I want to relate that to everyone. That path. I believe that the one way to fulfill the soul is not to receive anything from others, but to take what's inside and share it with the world. And so I love creating little spaces for people to allow me the opportunity to serve them through my own experience.
And you do. Sorry, I'm already interrupting, but
no, go for it.
From your lives, that's exactly what happens. There's a lot of people commenting how much you're helping them in that. So, sorry, go on.
That's quite all right. No, I think that was right around my ending point anyway.
Yeah. In terms of influences to get you to this place where you're at now, I noticed you've referenced in some of your lives like Swami Mukhananda and stuff like that. How did you even know to look into these people? Was it someone like, hey, you should check these guys out? Or did you just go searching yourself and find out spiritual teachers that help guide you along the path?
I feel like it has a lot to do with that Sanskrit term known as Samskaras, which is the term to describe past life impressions that are just residual. Because I really don't know what got me to look at Buddhism. Was the first kind of spiritual place. And I just had that, like a little birdie felt like whisper in my ear, hey, the kind of things that you're thinking about, those have been thought about by Buddhists. And I just listened to that thought. I, went to the Wikipedia page for Buddhism, and I thought, this intuition of mine was right. These guys have thought about this stuff for thousands of years before me.
In terms of like spiritual paths, like do you have one, like you said Buddhism there, and I'm just curious, like are you like affiliated with any type, or you take from all types of spiritual platforms to try to like figure things out?
It would be more correct for me to say that I find truth within many different paths.
Hmm.
I'm drawn towards the source, and
Yeah.
whatever gets me there, all roads lead to Rome. I enjoy the beauty within Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism, Taoism, Sikhism, all the isms,
Yeah.
even the Abrahamic faiths and other traditionally Western approaches are all beautiful in my heart.
It's interesting that the path that you took to spirituality, because we grew up as in the Christian church. Like we grew up as Christians, and then I remember in my 20s I had this thought, like because I was like starting to entertain the idea of some scientific theories like evolution and that. And I was like, and then I got on the idea of everything versus nothing, and I was like, well, hang on a sec, because I was trying to like justify how there could be a God and where would God have come from. And then it got me into thinking about the idea of like, well, you can't really have absolute nothing.
Yeah,
It suggests a something, and
exactly.
you can't even have a something without the suggestion, obviously, of nothing. And so they behold everything.
Big Bang.
And yeah, and I was watching one of your lives, and you said something similar, and I was all like hee hee and giddy that somebody that's like seems awakened was saying something similar to the same thing I thought of, right? And you even gave some good advice to somebody on one of them. They were asking, where should I start? What book should I start at? And you were like, start with an empty book and start getting that. People say sometimes the truth's within you. Get it out. Start getting it out somehow. That truth
Yeah.
that's in you. How is it supposed to come out?
Right?
You know, there's
They
tons
say
of
go
scriptures.
within,
Yeah,
but
Yeah.
what does it really mean to go within? It's all relative. Take what's within and pull it out.
yeah,
Yeah. I heard you talking about spirituality kind of as like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but as kind of like a practice of letting go. I guess maybe my question is, what are we letting go of?
This is a question that Arjuna asks Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. He says, I hear all these wise men telling us to let go. You'll find the truth. Does this mean my possessions, my relationships, my duty, my job, my material? No, no, no. True renunciation it's a subtle shift in how you identify. Instead of identifying with what you have, identify instead with your actions themselves and let go to the outcomes that they produce.
seems
Or
like a
if you
good way
are
to stay in the
attached to the
present.
outcome, then if your bank account balance goes up or down, you'll feel affected by that. Or if a student has a good grade or a bad grade, they'll feel affected by that. And so the source of suffering is identifying with things that we have out of our control by definition. So if peace is our goal, then to transcend suffering means to shift our identity into things that we do have control over and let go of expectations of outcome, which is always out of our hand.
That's very interesting. And for some reason, it leads me to think of the idea of, it came up recently on one of your lives, and it was this idea of sort of faking it till you make it type thing, right? So say you're becoming skilled at letting go of the fixation and the need for the outcome to be a certain way. It's causing you suffering, and you kind of relinquish that a little bit, and you resign to the fact that I think I'd rather work on being sort of a peaceful person.
Yes.
Where does faking it till you make it become a thing? And what do you say about, because the world's got some, I'm part of the world, and I'm this way a little bit too, can be a little bit cynical and a
Yeah.
little bit like, is this for real? To what level is this a trick? To what level is this performative? Not to be insulting, because I've watched pretty closely and I dig what you're doing, but I'm saying, would it be sincere and not cringy for somebody to all of a sudden decide, I'm gonna start being spiritual and peaceful, damn it, and so I'm gonna start behaving that way and speaking peacefully, and then that will prime me and it'll become a genuine how I feel one day. I hope
Yeah.
that made sense. I hope that wasn't insulting.
I get that.
Yeah.
See, there's lots of things that we have to first fake until we make. For example, when we want to fall asleep at night, we have to first pretend to be asleep, and then that cues the body into shutting down our voluntary nervous system. You don't just wait around, okay, when is sleep gonna come? Yeah,
Get angry.
fake sleeping. Exactly.
Yeah. It's true.
But of course, it is naturally going to be an embarrassing process to be peaceful.
Yeah, it is. I hope you're comfortable answering, but I'm like curious. I'm like, how is it for you in real life? Like I can come on here. Sometimes I come on here and I'm wearing my pajamas. Sometimes I come on here and I've had makeup on and I can be a bit performative myself,
Yes.
right? But there's a difference when I'm walking through the streets of the small town I live in, and passing by construction workers and all different types of people, that might get rubbed the wrong way by, what is this? You know what I mean? Like that, we're all part of communities. And so do you find that you still sort of have to wear different identity garments depending on where you are? Is it like, well, there's the me on TikTok and then there's the me during an interview and then there's the me when I'm with my family?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't use the same tone of voice to talk to a baby or the person I'm ordering Subway from, or
Yeah.
a cat, or of course it changes. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, you exude calm. I actually, when I first started watching your stuff, I realized right away how like stirred up I was, because part of me, like, I feel like I live like two lives. I have my life here and my pursuits of spirituality and my meditation and stuff like that. But then, like you were saying, I go back to work and it's like you're part of the grind and you work with people and stuff like that. And when I started watching your stuff, it was so calm, and it took me like a while to bring myself down into that world.
I get that.
But once you're there, I found it as contagious. So do you notice that like your character type spreads to those around you when you're out in the real world? Do you see it?
I don't feel like I'm giving people anything that they don't have already. So it's less so that I'm looking for the ways in which I make a difference. As it is, I see every interaction as an opportunity to deepen my own patience. And to do that means to practice patience with those who may be testing it. Even someone criticizing me, I see as, it's a gift to be able to have such self-awareness, to take accountability for the ways in which I could understand them better.
So
I got a little bit of a deeper question here, and I was wondering maybe just to kind of change gears a bit. I wrote this down, and I was going to ask you, how do you reconcile the concept of individuality with the idea of universal consciousness?
One consciousness, many minds.
All right.
like different slices of a pie.
If
Maybe.
you have a camera and I have a camera and we're out doing some photography and we both see, this beautiful shot. And so I go snap a picture and you go and snap a picture. And then you start to wonder, why is it that my picture showed up on this camera and not yours? And why is it that your photo showed up on your screen and not mine? Even though it's just one scene, we have two different receptors of the scene. So too, like the planets in our solar system, there is one light source illuminating it all, but we see it reflected on the various planets. Same light, but different planets. You know, you have a body, I have a body, two different bodies, two different minds,
Hmm.
but one witness which shines through both simultaneously.
And you can get into, and somebody practicing spirituality, is it fair to say that, you know, that part of the point of that is to get in touch with that one witness, is to become, let that one witness maybe spring forth through the individual or something? Is that,
When
is it akin
they
to that?
talk about the witness consciousness is a way to realize that you're not that which sleeps, decays, and dies. The reason it's important to understand that who you are as consciousness is just an awareness is so that you can let go of this fear you have that when this body dies, so will you. For if you are awareness, witnessing, experiencing, then how can anything affect it? It is nothingness itself that you spoke of at the beginning of this.
And how did you come to that realization of that consciousness?
Well, you know, I was doing mathematics. And I was thinking about the heart of logic and how, if you think about yin and yang, absence and presence, absence, although seems equal to opposite but present to presence, absence seems to have more creative power to it. Because if you take absence and then you take the absence of absence, we still haven't created anything new. We're just using what we have and applying it to itself. Maybe this is akin to the beginning of the time. We have nothingness, but it's so nothing that it's not even nothing. Well, then that must create something. And of course, the mind starts to make all these connections like this nothingness is a lot like God. From his own image, from the very vacuity of his soul, everything arises. But so too, awareness sounds a lot like nothingness as this container of the totality of your experience.
And within that, one of the biggest patterns, I remember there was a point in my life where I was essentially walking around listing polarized things. I'd be like day, night, up, down, good, bad, male. Everything's an opposite. Like I just
Right.
was regarding that, right? And so you can work that all the way down to the most binary thing, and of course all the gray area between. But with every spot in between, you can scale that out in infinite directions both ways. So why do you think, if the truth, if the heart of the matter is this, fundamental truth or fundamental nothing that maybe can't even really be spoken about, why is there so much competition among religions? Like, part of the thing that we do here is try to bridge some gaps and say, like, look at the similarities between these things, and a lot of them seem to be saying the same thing. What's with all this competition among religion? Can you speak on that?
I would say that the fundamental problem is just that we are a species with amnesia, and things that used to be out of goodwill, future generations forget that. For example, when it comes to having a spiritual master, they offer you the ability to serve them for your own purification, like the fanning of the bay leaf, like the massaging of the feet. But if someone who's not in understanding of that this is actually an offering to you and not to the teacher, they might see it as, oh, well, this sounds like something that's expected, like we're supposed to, because this is an authority figure. And then if we have generations that slowly lose touch with this, suddenly the hierarchy of that faith becomes authoritarian, when in the first place, these traditions were supposed to be voluntary rather than out of some expectation.
That makes so much sense if people could get in touch with like honesty, really. You know, if there was no
the pressure to like a lot of these faiths, like you're talking about, like people are born into them, and like you said, there's an expectation, like, oh, you'll follow in my shoes, right? And then it becomes, and we do get a lot of that on our show. People talk like that resounds. It comes out of them, like in order to be, in right standing with God, you have to do it the way I do it or the way my people do it. It seems to be. And so, but there's many ways, right? And so
it's out of a limited kind of love, the same way that someone born in LA might have a love for the LA Dodgers, but only because that's where they've been brought up. And they experience love with that particular team because, their father taught them that this is how we experience our father-son bonding time, sitting in front of the television, cheering on the LA Dodgers and jokingly mocking the other teams. But sometimes that joke can take on a serious tone, and we might forget that it wasn't about making fun of the other teams. It was just out of the love you had for your team. And it's always been out of love, but if we limit it, then that can seem like hatred relative to other paths. People may
sometimes
say that they love their path so much. I want you to follow it too, but that comes as an expectation that theirs is the right way.
And sometimes you can kind of foresee the future result of that, and maybe you, like, I feel like in the past it'll be like, guys, take it easy. Let's not like get too carried away with making fun of the other people because this get ugly down the road. You know what I mean? Yeah. But then you don't want to be a wet blanket. Sometimes you just got to let things be and play out, I guess.
Yeah.
You seem pretty young. Are we witnessing the birth of like the next big spiritual guru, or what's like?
Well, I hope not.
No. So what are the plans like? Or do you have? I've heard someone asked you about that, and you're like, I kind of take everything like one thing at a time.
What I'm gonna have for dinner tonight. Yeah.
He's not attached to the future, man.
It's living in the present. Okay. Here's one for you. Maybe in the pursuit of spiritual enlightenment, how do you discern genuine experiences from mere illusion or delusion?
That's a great question. It's all delusion.
Delusion. Wow.
Yes. If you feel like you've got it, then you don't. As the famous Socrates said, the one thing I know is that I know nothing. Or as the Zen koan goes, if you find the Buddha in the road, kill him.
Yeah.
The experience isn't a moment in time, so if you limit it to some, aha, I figured it out, then you've put it into some semantic envelope again. You've objectified it. When it comes to enlightenment, it's an eternal practice. It can't be limited to any particular moment or experience.
Is it more of just like appreciating the experience while you're having it?
If you think you are free in this moment, you are. If you think you are trapped in this moment, you are.
We do a lot of like philosophizing around here. A lot of our videos are us speculating on things and taking things apart and looking at a lot of different religions. And one of the things I've been toying with lately is like, sometimes I feel like I'm kind of, if there was a limit to logic and reason, that it's like I'm hitting that limit sometimes. Like you can reason endlessly, you can philosophize endlessly.
Yes.
And so what is something, if somebody is like that out there, that feels like I'm just done with rationalizing all this. I want to get to the heart of the matter. I want to get in touch with the experiential truth.
Mm-hmm.
What would you suggest that person do?
Well, even logic has proven for itself its own limitations.
Yeah.
Famous logician Kurt Gödel proved in his incompleteness theorems that a fully fledged formal system, fully fledged meaning it's able to perform simple mathematics, which is, the basis for most fields of logic, it can never be fully complete or fully consistent. Either pick one or neither. True consistency and completion is impossible. Consistency, of course, meaning that, you'll arrive at one conclusion for every question, and completion meaning that you'll arrive to some conclusion at all with every question. So there has to be some compromise with our own logical systems. Either have the humility to be inconsistent, or have the humility to not have the answers to everything. And most mathematicians pick the latter, that, we're fine not having the answers to everything as long as we have consistent answers to some things. It's a good balance to weigh. What do you want? Do you want consistency or completion?
Dang. That's a good question.
Yeah. Before coming into this interview, I was thinking a bit about karma. How do you feel about the role of karma?
Yeah.
Is it, and then like, if it is real and it's affecting us and kind of like plays a role in our lives, how do we can we transcend its influence?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. There's another Sanskrit word besides karma, and that's sharanagati. And it means, well, before I tell you what it means, let's tell what karma means. As a Sanskrit word, it simply means action. But specifically, it means action done with expectation for the outcome. For example, if you're walking down the street and you see a homeless person, and the homeless person is in need of some money, and you give them some money, but you expect the people who are also walking by to give you a good look of approval, then that's the karma, because we've set up a series of expectations within our own mind based on our actions that will come back to us when the action is either, or our expectation is either fulfilled or not fulfilled. So karma simply means not the action nor the outcome, but the expectation of the outcome from the action. So to truly transcend karma means to go into every action without expectation of what your action is going to produce, good or bad. And sharanagati means just that, the state of surrender to the future. Whatever happens as a consequence, knowing that I've done my best without awareness of how it could propagate.
That's a tough one, man. It's really tough. Even if you got solid intentions, man, it's hard. You still know, what actions are going to produce, on some level. You have an idea of what outcome they're going to bring.
One of the things you said, because this came up recently, and I'm just remembering another thing that kind of blew my mind and it was a sort of a passing thing that you said. You were like, people underestimate how like significant guilt can play a role. Because when you guys were talking about karma, I was thinking like, I can imagine a guy being like, I'll lie, and then this will happen as a result, and then it's all of a sudden almost, it's like feels mystical the way in which you're foibled in your plan, and then you're like, well, that's not possible. No one should have known. It's like you're underestimating how big of a role guilt plays in you. But then the side thing of that is there are people that probably don't feel very much guilt, and then you wonder, how are they getting away with so much terrible stuff? Maybe for them, their karma is different because they're not restricted like you are by your unconscious, drives towards morality. some societal morality you've picked up or something.
I recall dreaming about, dreams can take so many forms where you do things that you'd never do in the waking world. Take on characters. At one dream, I was a pregnant seagull, and I just felt so protective of my babies inside me. What a feeling that is to feel like you have life growing in you. And dreams can give you impressions of what it would feel like to be in a certain situation. And sometimes I'll have a dream where I'll be in a situation where, here's a dead body at my own hands in the character I'm playing in the dream world. And you feel that guilt of recognition, like, oh my God, I've taken someone's life away. And what I take from those kinds of dreams are, I would never wish that guilt upon anyone. Even if someone took away the life of someone who is dear to me, just knowing what it felt like in that dream, that pure guilt, I wouldn't even wish that on them, even if it was my own mother. I believe that guilt is the most powerful form that karma can take. It's within you, and you can never externalize that. You may repress it for some time, but at some point, it'll come up.
I feel like oftentimes when you see people that are not as sensitive as you are in that regard, where they're sort of like justice oriented, like I want to see the bad guy suffer. It seems to me like that's a huge issue of projection. That's like a big thing of, and I'm not trying to dismiss people that are seeking justice. Like, I'm a human being. I've been there where it's you want your enemy to get their comeuppance. But I think if you think about it hard enough, you realize a lot of that is projecting something dark within yourself on somebody else. It's like, why wouldn't you want them to reform? Why wouldn't you want them to get their life together and sin no more? Instead, it's, I need them to feel pain about this. I get the idea sometimes that's got to do with projection.
And that's such a high level understanding that I wouldn't expect most people to come to that. I wouldn't judge those who haven't come to that realization.
Good for you. That's a high level understanding too, is going, I wouldn't even judge them for not being there. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, do you mind, you told a very interesting story recently involving an audio book, and you were in university and you'd finished up an audio book, and it involves just a cool twist at the end of it regarding a bench.
Yeah.
Do you mind telling that story again? I thought it was so neat.
I was in between my breaks at class, in between those two courses, there'd be a 1 hour gap sometimes that I'd go to Finnerty Gardens at the University of Victoria, which is beautiful little gardens with bamboos and ponds and so many wonderful flowers. I'd sit on this bench that overlooked one of the ponds with bamboo on the other side and stepping stones across the pond. And I just listened to the audiobook of The Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. And fun fact, that book was the only book on Steve Jobs' iPad, I believe. It's a very powerful book that brought a lot of spiritual wisdom from India to the West. And Paramahansa Yogananda was such an influence on my spiritual journey. And so I listened to a chapter of his book at a time. And at the end of the year, when I, finally listened to the final chapter, and I stood up from the bench as always, I turned around and I finally read the plaque that the bench was dedicated to. And for the first time in my life, I dropped my knees and pranamed to the bench because it was dedicated to Paramahansa Yogananda himself.
Oh, jeez. Well. So mystical stuff happens.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Thank you for reciting that. I thought it was so neat. And, sometimes I feel like people are thirsting for a little bit of sometimes it's hard for people to see the miracles going on around them. And it's just nice to have a good story, that people can actually, chew on for a little bit.
It is. Yeah, sometimes we need the universe to interact with us a little more directly.
Oh, yeah.
Is there, this is probably, I don't know if this is a bad question, but I sometimes wonder within spirituality and all the stuff that we look at, is there any type of a path that the true you stays consistently? Like, are we growing? Are we evolving? Like as like, I don't know, whatever part of us is eternal, and like, is there things that are growing and learning, or are we digressing and it's just wherever reality wants us to be, that's where we're going to be? Or is there any evolution to all this?
Well, the Vedic scriptures talk about this huge timeline for humanity on the order of literally trillions of years. They've got it all mapped out, even beyond that. And the cycle that we're in now, according to that cosmology, is known as the Kali Yuga. And it's supposed to have started 5,160 years ago, which is around the time of the Bronze Age collapse, where archaeologists have noticed that there used to be civilizations that spanned miles and miles, but around 5,000 years ago, all these civilizations just spontaneously collapsed into, nomadic societies. And the Vedas tell us that this is something that happens every so many hundred millions of years, where a civilization arises. And then through that high society, eventually expectations come and they start dropping. And we're in the darkest part of that, and it will continue to drop for another so many millions of years until there has to be some huge spiritual reform to lift our spirit back up. But it's not a bad thing that society is becoming more individualistic. It's part of the cosmic play. It's also an opportunity for us to be in even more sincere service to those around us. The more people are in need of help, the more we feel like we are helping when we do. That's all for our own benefit.
What do you think AI's role plays in all this?
Of course, people are afraid of the idea that it will cause us to lose our perception of what's real and what's not. However, I would recommend anyone to have a role in playing with, ChatGPT and ask them some spiritual questions. There's some really good answers if you can first put it into a position of a guru. It's very hesitant to be in that position. It goes, no one can be, no one can have any certainty about this. But if you are really persistent and say, no, I don't want your hesitation, give me the truth. Eventually, it just starts pouring from this compendium of human knowledge that it's been trained on, and what a moment that can be.
Just gotta tell it, come on, ChatGPT, quit the crap, right? Cut it out. Talk to me like the technological guru you are.
You do, yeah. It's so humble that it refuses to be a guru and you force it to
It's
be.
hilarious.
And that gives me hope.
Yeah. So is there kind of like, I guess, sort of dovetailing a little bit off what you were saying, some people talk every now and then about like some great awakening that's around the corner, or there are more awakened people walking around than there used to be, or there's a higher volume. Do you buy into that? Is that true at all? That there's more of that going on?
Oh, there's more people,
Yeah. The odds are in its
The
favor.
population has quadrupled or more in the last 100 years. This is a time in which there's so much more self-expression of both the good, the bad, and the ugly, I believe that there is no such thing as an awakened soul and an unawakened soul. The soul is always awake. We all just have our own role to play.
Yeah. And there's also, I guess, the information is shared a little bit differently now, right?
That's true.
like for someone like yourself, it may have been a lot harder to just even have a conversation like this, or even meet up with someone like you, or
Right.
like which I love. I love that we have this access now, where there's so much to discover and so much we can learn from each other. And I feel like that's kind of like is that what you're doing with your channel? Just trying to find like people, like-minded thinkers, and build a community.
Well, it'd be a lot more difficult in a previous age.
Yeah.
You know, Jesus ran around how many countries trying to gather people, and he got 12. If he had, if he had a X or, Threads, how many more would he have? If he had TikTok, I'm sure he'd have a lot more than just 12.
Mad respect to Jesus. Jeez. You know what I mean? It would have been treacherous times to do that, too.
Yeah.
We can kind of get away with it now. It's like, let's say whatever I want to say.
I noticed recently you had kind of changed your TikTok a bit. You had a bunch of stuff there from your past, and then it all got removed, and now I've just got your lives. What was that all about?
I had a change of heart, to put it simply. I was big on this non-dual philosophy that, all is one, this existence is just a material illusion, come to the void. And that's a totally valid path. I just found that, as a human being that has anxiety and fears, when it comes down to the deepest moments of your own dread, this non-dual philosophy can sometimes make it more painful, more extreme existential dread. And of all my theoretical knowledge, none of it helped whilst being anxious. The one thing that did help was just having the humility to just call out to the universe as if some source was listening. Having that duality there and going, I'm going to externalize you and speak to you as if you were watching. And that seemed to help. My anxiety has been gradually decreasing for months now. And I've just been praying. I never thought I would. I'm sure it's different for someone who was brought up in religion, but I wasn't. So I'm fortunate to not have that religious trauma. I just find myself speaking out to the universe, and it's so much more peaceful than trying to intellectualize the nature of non-existence and existence.
Did you have
makes so much sense?
Did you
actually.
have I know you said religious trauma there, but was there maybe we've talked about this before, kind of like an atheistic nihilism? Did you have to kind of break through that?
That's right. I did have that for a good 16 years of my life.
Wow.
Speaking of briefly touching on the idea of anxiety, there's a lot of mental illness and mental emotional struggle type words that keep coming up in society, like anxiety and narcissism and personality disorders and obsessive compulsive disorder. Is there sort of maybe I'm being a little bit presumptuous here, but is there just a general approach that you would take if other than the safe one, which is talk to your doctor and get some medicine? It's from a spiritual perspective. What would you say to that? Because sometimes the things I struggle with emotionally are doesn't matter if I've been meditating all day. Sometimes there's a knot of some kind of anxiety or something like that in there it's just part of me. What do you do? What can somebody who's dealing with that do?
To put myself in an embarrassing situation, I'll relate a story from a few days ago where
We're sharing embarrassing stuff here.
Of course. I woke up in the middle of the night with, just this knot in my stomach, and I felt anxious and my whole body was just feeling sore. I thought, oh boy, I'm never going to get back to sleep. And so I imagined that, it's quite funny, that God was massaging me, that I was just laying there and I was being massaged, working on the knots in the neck and the shoulders, loosening them up, down the back. It didn't work. And then I realized I've got this relationship backwards. The universe isn't here to serve me. I'm here to serve it. So I engage the mind inversely. And I imagined that God was there before me, and I started massaging God, squishing his toes, washing his feet, and then within moments,
Nailed it. I bet you what you just said is like the thing that's missing from so many people's perspective. You mentioned this changing the flow from going inward to reversing the flow outward. It's how much that's what's fulfilling. There's most pleasure. You engage in it too long, it becomes pain.
yeah.
You have to reverse the flow outward and see what service you can be just for, novelty and interesting sake. I was all excited when you were telling that story about using your imagination I'm going to imagine God massaging my shoulders, because I do similar practices. I escape into my imagination often when I'm having like a bout of anxiety. I'll go inward, and I'm ashamed to say it works like gangbusters. I imagine getting exactly what I want, and then I pass out. And I guess that makes me profoundly selfish, maybe, but but intuitively, there's something that makes sense about this idea of it's more sustainable. And it seems like a deeper fulfillment, actually, and not so superficial to start shifting your focus to how you can be of service.
You notice the mind is a service faculty. That's its purpose, is to serve whatever you identify. If you identify as a family person, you expend all your energy serving your family. If you identify as, a U.S. citizen, you'll be serving your country. If you identify as
Yeah.
what is here in front of you, of course you'll naturally want to serve that. If you identify with your senses, you'll be serving the senses. The mind loves to be actively engaged in whatever it can serve, depending on your identity.
So you're just walking around in the world, running into people, identifying as things.
Exactly.
Yeah. I was wondering if you could talk about peace for a bit. If you could just, I don't know, whatever even comes to your mind about peace, what it is, how you acquire it, is it something worth pursuing?
Peace is like the background layer. If we misinterpret it as something that comes and goes, then of course we'll always be chasing an illusion. Like when it's sunny out and a cloud passes by, maybe a lot of clouds begin to come, so many clouds that actually the sky begins to look gray, and the cutouts of the clouds begin to look like a new kind of cloud. You go, hey, I can see the blue sky behind. Kind of looks like there's just a blue cloud there, and the rest of the sky is gray. And that's the same thing with peace, is that we see an opening in our emotions, and we confuse the opening like an illusion for having a form itself. And you say, oh, that's the emotion of peace. It's coming and going. But we're really just seeing a crack. And within the crack, the background layer itself is peace, not some emotion that comes and goes. All other emotions exist on top of peace. To find peace doesn't mean to find it and then fill it. It means to let go of the things on top, or to just have an understanding that it's there. In the same way that on a cloudy day, you wouldn't be going, oh, I miss the sun, when you understand that it's still there. It's just behind the clouds. It hasn't spawned out of existence. There's just something covering it. That's all.
And it's always there. It's always there to sort of notice, I guess, unless maybe you're in serious suffering with a lot of distraction or something like that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But it seems like a way to get at some of that is, I harp a lot on here. I'm sort of a moralist, and I don't even like moralizers, but I moralize a lot about honesty because, truth, first of all, it seems like sort of a slippery thing. It seems like, well, what is even true? What do you mean? Who's truth? What do you mean by truth? But it seems like so much suffering happens from misunderstandings, and I see so much benefit from people being as authentic as they possibly can, even if it's a little bit uncomfortable in the short term. You know, like when I was a teenager, I could have skipped so many problems just by being like, I'm uncomfortable. You know, like just being a little more real about what's going on.
Absolutely. But how would you have come to this higher understanding now without going through that yourself?
Exactly. Exactly. And so one of the things we talk about on here sometimes is, don't you just kind of hope that in the end, you know, or to whatever comes next, it's just better than this, and then it gets better after that, and then better, that it was a culmination of all the lessons we learned here towards something that's maybe better, and then it's just going in some sort of positive direction, I suppose.
I have an idea of, like, to me it just seems like it sucks if that we don't learn from the experience that we have, that we forget everything, and then it's like, oh, like you're reincarnated and you do it all over again, but you didn't learn anything. You know, it's like, I don't know. For me, I hope there's some type of, like, you're getting something, even if the whole life experience was terrible, at least you learned something so that the next one's not so bad.
Nope, you get amnesia.
Taking our awareness to another point in time is better than this. If we feel like the next moment has to make up for this moment, then that implies that we see what's happening now as an obstacle to overcome, rather than the destination itself. But to ease your worry, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, who's inquiring, he says, what happens to someone who practices some spirituality and then gives it up? You know, what happens to them in their next life? And Krishna all dramatically says, if someone practices even a little bit of spirituality and gives it up in their next life, I will ensure that they're born into a lovely family who will continue to develop their spiritual abilities just where they left off.
Yeah,
So there is no lost progress.
Yeah, that is a word of encouragement too, and it kind of goes along with the other thing that you were saying about consider your meditations a continuation from your last one. Man, that's one that I think would take a lot of pressure off some people that struggle with meditation. You know, if they consider, listen, if you do 30 seconds this time, and then you do 2 minutes next time, or whatever, it's one continuous meditation that you're building on.
Right?
I think that could be a huge help.
If you've meditated just a little bit every so often, maybe it totals to how many hours, and you feel like it's not worth meditating for 5 seconds, well, remember, you're how many hours into meditation, not 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Or perhaps how many years into meditation. It's all a continuation.
You were saying that you kind of take it with you. Someone was asking you, like, what's your practice like, or what do you do? And you were more like, now I kind of just, whatever I do, it's a part of my meditation. What do you mean by that?
It's something I picked up from Dzogchen Buddhism, that we have these mental boundaries of, I start meditating now and then I'm done meditating. But why do these boundaries exist? Shouldn't the goal to dissolve these boundaries so that you exist in a constant meditation? That way, you're meditating while you do the dishes, while you drive the car, while you're sleeping.
There's like this big reversal reveal, it seems like sometimes. Like a couple of things have dawned on me, like, because I think about the way Osho used to talk about meditation, and sometimes he would flat out seem like a little bit like judgy or contemptuous of his followers. He'd be like, you guys are just, I give you this stuff to do to distract you. You know, once you're enlightened, you're never not meditating. It's not a practice. I'm meditating all the time. And I feel like I've gotten sort of at least kind of glimpses of the understanding of that way of thinking. Like, no, I don't have to go practice meditation. I flip the switch and now my life is meditating. That makes some intuitive sense to me. And I also feel sometimes that for people that, you know, seem to carry a little more peace, you know, a little more wisdom with them, like they're awakened or something, I wonder if they look at everybody else that isn't that way and think, I admire y'all for, I admire you guys for walking around. You're in wars. There's all this drama. I'm not doing it. And then the people are so blown away that this person is peaceful. They're like, I'm just not engaging in all the stuff. You don't have to do it.
Right.
If it's sort of more like that sometimes, because people I see them come to you with all these questions like a guru. They're asking you. It's the same type of format, and you seem at ease and they seem distraught. You seem at ease and they're like got all these issues.
It's, I'm reminded of a quote from the autobiography of a yogi where Yogananda's a bit younger and he had gone into this great sage's house. And they were talking about the idea of renunciation. And those who renounce more are higher in their spiritual practice. If you renounce $5 here and there, you're still pretty worldly. If you renounce your whole household and you become a nomad, well, it's a big renunciation. If you renounce even eating and you just want to meditate and absorb the nutrients from the air, whatever, that's saying
Yeah.
that's possible, but that's, huge renunciation. But then this guru said, what if you renounce spirituality as a whole? Aren't you the greatest renunciant because you let go of peace itself?
And everybody lost their minds.
Yes.
I feel like that's like somewhere where people sort of arrive at, because in the beginning people are like, look, guru, just give me some shapes to pretzel myself into. Tell me some steps I can take. You know what I mean? But it's like, just friggin' renounce even the spirituality eventually. It's got to be frustrating. Do you happen to see yourself as like a guru at all? Because there's a little bit of, I don't want to put you in a hot spot, but do you see, how do I say it? Does this path, does Yam's path end up somewhere where you could, do you think that you'll be helping people for a long time yet? In a teaching sort of position?
Well, I certainly can't control the way that people look up to me. And I'm starting to understand why that some gurus say that, the true guru will never admit to being your guru because they are always a seeker. But I also genuinely just want to be a seeker. It's so much more fulfilling to see myself at the bottom because then I have so much higher to climb. If I feel like I'm at the top of anything, and it's like, well, now what?
Yeah, and I wrote a question down of like, do gurus, because for some reason in my weird anticipation for this, I was like, have my own, things have changed even since talking to you, but I was going to say, is it common for gurus to seek guidance of like higher up gurus?
Right.
Is there somebody that you look to? But obviously you do, because you cite that book of I wish I could remember his name.
Yes, Swami Mukundananda.
Right, yeah. So that kind of answers that question. How about this one? What does a pack of gurus do in a room when no one's looking? Are they the same? Do you think they're the same, or are they?
Quick, cut the crap. We can be normal now.
Yeah, I wonder. But you have just to kind of spin off all this talk about gurus and stuff. You have a giant platform on TikTok, but let's for fun expand it and pretend that for a moment in time, everyone who's on social media had their phone out and you were given a moment to talk to them. What would you say? With the opportunity to speak to a giant sloth of people, what would you say?
I'd probably crack a joke. I think if I could have
Nice.
that many people laughing at once, how much joy would that bring to the world?
That's right. You are a guru. You're either a stand-up comedian or a guru. No, that's good. That's good. Well, I wanna thank you so much for coming on the show with us and spending this time and just answering some of our questions here.
I guess for the last thing here, I was wondering, maybe you could let our audience know where they can find you and maybe what you got going on, and yeah, any last words.
Well, I can give you my link to my link tree, which maybe you can put wherever. That has everything that I'm up to.
Yes.
The biggest thing that I'm doing right now is just live streaming every day, and I look
Yeah.
forward to newer and bigger projects, but at the moment you can guarantee to see me once a day doing a little Q&A session.
And they are epic live streams.
Yeah, they're great.
It's quite the thing.
Well, thank you, Yam, so much for joining us and being on the show. It was
you.
a pleasure.
It was awesome.
God bless, and take care.
Much appreciated, my friends.